boot kicked open the great iron doors of the throne hall. A woman was shoved forward across the polished black floor. She fell hard onto her knees, both hands flying down to cover the curve of her belly. Her lip was split. Her wrists were raw. Her wedding dress was streaked with mud and blood. The court of vampires froze. Every pale face turned. Every red eye locked on the small, bruised figure kneeling at the foot of the obsidian steps. The man who threw her in did not bow. He smiled. He called her a gift. He called her a tribute. He said her name like it was nothing. He said, "Take her, drain her, do what you want with her." Her name was Myra. She was 22 years old. She was 8 months pregnant. And she had not been told she was being sold tonight. Why did the vampire king rise from his throne the moment her blood hit the marble? Stay with me on this one. Myra had been a flower girl 2 years ago. She tied ribbons on bouquets in a small shop 3 streets behind the cathedral. She had a cat named Button. She had a mother who coughed too much in winter. She had savings hidden in a tin behind the loose brick by the back stove. She was not anyone important. She was not promised to anyone special. She was a girl who worked from dawn to dusk and brought home bread her mother could chew without pain. She knew every face that walked into her shop. She knew the priest who bought lilies every Friday. She knew the baker's wife who liked daisies. She knew the old widow who only ever bought 1 carnation a week and counted out the coins with shaking fingers. Myra had a small life, and she was good at it. She was not waiting to be rescued. She was not waiting to be chosen. She was already doing the work of staying alive in a town that did not give girls like her many chances. Then a carriage stopped in front of her shop. A man stepped out in a black coat lined with silver. He had clean hands. He had cold blue eyes. He bought every rose she had. He came back the next day. He bought every rose again. He told her his name was Lord Hadrian. He told her he had been watching her for weeks. He told her she was going to be his wife. She tried to say no. Her mother told her not to be stupid. Her mother said girls like them did not get offers like that twice in a lifetime. Her mother said a lord could pay for medicine. A lord could pay for a roof that did not leak. A lord could keep her safe. So Myra said yes. She signed the paper. She wore the white dress. She moved into the cold stone house on the hill above the town. And on the 3rd night of her marriage, Lord Hadrian hit her for the first time. He hit her because the soup was too salty. He hit her again the next week because she laughed at something a servant said. By the end of the 1st month, she had learned to walk soft. She had learned to keep her eyes on the floor. She had learned that the man in the black coat had never been kind. He had only been patient. She found out she was pregnant 6 weeks in. She did not tell him for as long as she could hide it. Believe me, she knew what kind of father he would be. She knew what kind of bruises a man like that would leave on a child. She prayed for a miracle every night. She prayed quietly. She prayed in the chapel he made her attend on Sundays. She prayed in the garden where the roses had all gone brown. She tried once to walk back to her mother's house. She got as far as the front gate before 2 of Hadrian's guards turned her around. They did not hit her. They did not need to. They just walked her back to her room and closed the door and stood outside it for 3 days. Her mother sent letters. Myra never saw them. Hadrian burned them in the fireplace one by one in front of her so she would understand exactly how alone she was. And miracles do not come for girls like Myra. Not usually. Not the soft kind. The miracle that came for her came with fangs. The kingdom of Hadrian's family bordered the Old Forest. The Old Forest belonged to the Crimson Court. Everyone knew the rules. Humans did not enter. Vampires did not leave. There had been peace between the two for 300 years. Peace held by treaty. Peace held by tribute. Once a generation, the human lord sent a gift to the Crimson Throne. A horse. A casket of wine. A rare painting. The vampire king accepted the gift. He sent back a token of his own. Everyone kept breathing. The system worked, until Hadrian decided the system could work harder for him. He wanted more land. He wanted soldiers. He wanted the king's banner on his side in the war he was planning against his own cousin. So he sat in his study one winter night, and he decided what to send. He decided he would send a wife. He decided he would send the bruised one. He decided he would send the one carrying the bastard he did not believe was his. He had accused her of the child being another man's 2 weeks before. She had not been near another man in her life. He did not care. The accusation was the excuse he needed. The tribute was the plan he had wanted. He told her to put on her wedding dress one more time. He told her they were going on a ride. He did not tell her where. He did not tell her why. He put her in the carriage himself. He locked the door from the outside. The horses ran through snow for 4 hours. She tried the door once. The door did not move. She tried the window. The window was nailed shut from the outside. She sat with her hands on her belly, and she watched the trees go from oak to pine to something darker she did not have a name for. The snow fell harder the deeper they went. The horses started to slow. The driver started to whisper to them, the way men whisper to horses when the horses know better than the men do. And the gates of the Crimson Court rose up out of the trees like black teeth. So now you understand how she got here. Kneeling on cold marble. Belly heavy. Lip split. A husband she did not love standing behind her, telling a room full of vampires to drink her dry. He thought he was being clever. He thought he had given the king a problem to solve and a reward to enjoy. He thought he would walk out of here with a banner and a war. He did not understand who he had just put on the floor. The vampire king had not spoken yet. He sat very still on his throne. He was tall. He was lean. His hair was black and longer than a king's hair should be. His skin was the color of old paper. His eyes were not red. They were dark gray, almost human, almost gentle almost. He wore no crown. He did not need one. Every vampire in that hall already knew who he was. They knew his name was Kale. They knew he had ruled the Crimson Court for 900 years. They knew he had lost the only person he ever loved a long time before any of them were born. And they knew he had not smiled since. Now here's the thing. He was not looking at Hadrian. He was looking at Myra. He was looking at the way her hands curved around her belly. He was looking at the bruise on her cheekbone. He was looking at the small, steady rise and fall of her breath. He tilted his head 1 inch. He inhaled, and every vampire in the room felt the air in the hall change. He stood. The whole court stood with him. He walked down the obsidian steps. 1, 2, 3. Each footstep echoed. He did not stop in front of Hadrian. He stepped past him as if he were a piece of furniture. He stopped in front of Myra. He went down on 1 knee. The court gasped. A vampire king does not kneel. A vampire king has not knelt in any record any scribe has kept. But this one did. Slow, quiet, without theater. He lifted her chin with 1 careful finger. He looked at the split lip. He looked at the swollen eye. He looked at her belly. He closed his eyes for 1 long second. When he opened them, they were not gray anymore. They were the color of fire under deep water. He said 1 word. He said, "Child." Her belly kicked under her hand. He felt it. She felt him feel it. And something old in the room cracked open. He stood up. He turned. Hadrian was still smiling because Hadrian did not understand yet. The king said, "You brought this woman here." The king said, "You brought her bruised." The king said, "You brought her pregnant." Hadrian said, "Yes, my lord, a generous tribute, the finest I could offer." The king said, "Who hit her?" Hadrian said, "My lord, women fall, the snow was bad, the carriage was rough." The king said, "Who hit her?" He said it the second time slower. Hadrian's smile slipped. He started to speak. The king raised one hand. Hadrian's mouth closed. He could not open it again. He stood frozen. Myra did not understand what she was watching. She would understand soon. The king turned back to her. He held out his hand. He said, "Stand if you can." She stood. Her legs shook. He did not rush her. He waited. He led her 3 steps away from her husband. He pointed at a chair beside his throne. He said, "Sit." She sat. He looked at her belly again. He said, "The child inside you is mine." The room went absolutely silent. Myra shook her head. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. He said it again. He said, "The child inside you carries my blood." He said, "Your grandmother was a girl I loved 9 generations ago." He said, "I let her go because she chose a human life." He said, "I did not know her line continued." He said, "The heartbeat I just felt is the heartbeat I have waited 400 years to hear." The court rocked. Some of the vampires fell back a step. One old courtier dropped her wine glass. It hit the marble and did not shatter. It just rolled. An older lord at the back of the hall put one hand on the obsidian column beside him to steady himself. A young vampiress in the second row started crying without making any sound. 2 of the king's own council stepped closer to the throne, as if the floor itself might no longer hold them. None of them had ever seen the king speak this many words at once. Not in any of their lifetimes. And not one of them was foolish enough to ask him to say it a 3rd time. He turned to face the hall. He said, "This woman is under my protection." He said, "This child is the heir of the Crimson Court." He said, "Anyone who has touched her in violence will answer for it tonight." And then he looked at Hadrian. Hadrian's frozen mouth could move now. Hadrian started to apologize. Hadrian started to bargain. Hadrian offered land. Hadrian offered gold. Hadrian offered to leave and never return. The king did not answer him. He nodded to 2 of his guards. They took Hadrian by the arms. They walked him out the side door. He did not scream yet. He would scream later. Myra did not see him scream. The king made sure of that. The king turned back to her. He said, "You are safe." He said, "Breathe." He said, "You do not have to thank me." He said, "You do not have to do anything." He said, "Just breathe." She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. And then her legs gave out and she fell into the chair beside his throne, and she cried for the first time in 2 years. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. Because what happens after the king kneels is not the end of the danger. It is the start of a new one. And Myra does not know it yet. They carried her up a flight of curved stone stairs. They put her in a chamber with a fire already lit. The bed was made of dark wood and white sheets. There were candles on every table. There was bread on a tray. There was warm broth. There was a robe of gray silk laid across the foot of the bed. 2 women came in. They were vampires. They were old. They were quiet. They washed her face. They washed her hands. They did not speak unless she spoke first. They wrapped her in the robe. They tucked her into the white sheets. They put a hand on her belly very softly, and they whispered something Myra could not understand. Then they bowed and left. The door closed. The fire crackled. The candles burned. Myra lay there in the warmest bed she had ever touched in her entire life. And for the first time in 2 years, no one was going to hit her tonight. She thought. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She listened. She listened to the wind outside. She listened to the fire. She listened to the small movement of the child inside her. She put both hands on her stomach and she whispered, "We're okay, we're okay, we're okay." She said it like a song. She said it like a spell. She said it until the words did not feel like a lie. and somewhere in the deep middle of that quiet a thin sound slid under her door. Metal, sliding metal, slow, careful, a dagger, just the dagger. No footsteps, no voice, just a long thin knife pushed across polished stone until it stopped touching the leg of her bed. She sat up. Her breath caught. She looked at the door. The handle did not move. She looked at the dagger. It was hers. It was the small kitchen knife she used to keep in her sleeve back at Hadrian's house. The one she had hidden there in case one of his bad nights got worse. The one he had found 2 months ago and confiscated. The one he had told her she would never see again. She knew exactly whose hand had just slid that knife under the door. He had not left. He had been put out by the king's guards. He had not been killed. Not yet. He had crept back into the keep. He had bribed someone. He had found her room. He had given her back her own knife. Not as mercy. As a message. He was coming. And he wanted her to know. She did not scream. She did not move at first. She watched the door. She watched the gap of light underneath it. Then she saw the shadow. 2 boots. Standing perfectly still on the other side of the door. Just waiting. She slid out of bed very slow. She picked up the knife. She backed against the far wall. Her heart was loud. The child kicked. She pressed her hand against the kick. She whispered, "Not tonight, not us, not tonight." The handle of the door turned. Just 1 inch. It stopped. Because somewhere down the corridor, very far away, a single set of footsteps had started walking. Slow. Even. Calm. The kind of footsteps a man takes when he has all the time in the world. The kind of footsteps that do not run because they do not need to. The shadow under the door pulled away from the door. The boots backed up a step. The handle stopped turning. Hadrian had heard the footsteps too. The king walked the length of that corridor without speaking. He did not call out. He did not announce himself. He simply walked. The candles in the corridor leaned away from him as he passed. Myra heard the boots on the other side of her door start to move. Hadrian was running. The king's footsteps did not speed up. They did not need to. There was nowhere in this keep Hadrian could run that the king did not own. There was no door that did not open for him. There was no window the night did not belong to. The boots turned a corner. The king's footsteps reached her door. 3 soft knocks. He said her name. He said, "I'm coming in." He said, "Do not be afraid." He opened the door. He saw the knife in her hand. He saw the shadow under the door. He understood the entire story in 1 second. He looked at her once. He looked at her belly once. He looked at the small wet patch on her cheek where 1 tear had fallen and dried halfway. His jaw moved 1 inch. The gray in his eyes turned darker than she had seen it yet. He said, "Give me the knife." She did. He looked at it. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the first smile he had made in a long time. He put the knife in his belt. He said, "Stay." He said, "Lock the door behind me." He said, "Count to 100. He said, "When you reach 100, I will be back." He stepped out. The door closed. The lock turned. She listened. She counted. 1, 2, 3. Her hands shook on the count of 7. She kept counting. The child kicked on the count of 20. She put a hand on the kick. She kept counting. By the count of 60, she could hear nothing at all. The keep had gone completely silent, as if every wall in it were holding its breath with her. She did not hear running. She did not hear shouting. She heard 1 set of footsteps following another. She heard them go down the stairs. She heard them cross the great hall. She heard them go out the side door into the courtyard. And then she heard 1 set of footsteps stop. Just 1. The other set kept walking. Slow. Even. Come. They walked across the courtyard. They walked into the great hall. They walked back up the stairs. They came to her door. 3 soft knocks. She opened it. He was not breathing hard. There was a small dark stain on his cuff. He did not look at it. He said, "It is done." He said, "You will not see him again." He said, "You will never have to look at his face." He said, "I am sorry I let him walk this far before I ended it." He said, "I should have known." He said, "I should have smelled him on you the moment you came in." He said, "I am sorry." The Vampire King was apologizing to a flower girl from a small town. The whole world had turned upside down inside one night. She did not know what to say. She said, "My name is Myra." He smiled the small smile a second time. He said, "I know." He said, "I should have asked you properly hours ago." He said, "May I come in?" She said, "Yes." He came in. He did not sit on the bed. He sat on the chair by the fire. He folded his hands. He waited. He did not push. He did not ask anything she was not ready to answer. He just sat there with her until her breathing slowed, until the child stopped kicking, until the candles burned lower, until she fell asleep sitting up against the pillows with both hands still wrapped around her belly. He did not move all night. He did not eat. He did not need to. He sat in the chair and he watched the door and he watched the woman and he watched the shape of the small life under her hands. He thought about the girl whose face Myra's reminded him of. He thought about a meadow 9 generations back. He thought about how long 400 years feels when you spend it alone. He thought about how a single bruised girl walking into his hall had undone every promise he had made to himself about not loving anything ever again. And somewhere around the 3rd hour before dawn, she felt his coat being draped softly over her shoulders. She did not open her eyes. She let him. She let herself rest. 3 weeks later, she was still in the same chamber. The bruises were gone. Her lip had healed. Her hair had been combed back to shine. She had been fed 3 times a day. She had walked in the garden every afternoon under the gray winter sky. The vampires of the court bowed when she passed now. They did not speak to her unless she spoke first. The king had not asked her for anything. He had not asked for her hand. He had not asked her to stay. He had not asked her to leave. He simply made sure she had everything she needed. A midwife from the village 2 valleys over came every other day. A seamstress made her 3 new dresses, all soft, all warm, none white. A small gray kitten with 1 folded ear arrived in her room one morning with a ribbon around its neck. She named it Button. She cried when she named it Button. He had remembered the cat from her old life. She did not know how. She suspected the king knew everything about her old life by now. She was not afraid of that anymore. Her mother arrived in the 2nd week. 2 of the king's guards had ridden 3 days through the snow to bring her. The cough was still there, but the medicine was better here. Myra held her mother for the first time in 2 years, and neither of them said a word for almost an hour. Her mother slept in the next chamber down the corridor. The midwife visited her too. The king paid for everything and never once mentioned the cost. He never once asked Myra to be grateful. He simply did the thing that needed doing and stepped back so she could decide what she wanted to feel about it. She gave birth on a clear cold night in early spring. The midwife was there. 2 of the old vampire women were there. Her mother held her hand through the worst of it. The king was outside the door. He did not come in. He waited. He waited the way men wait when they understand that the room belongs to the woman inside it. He stood there for 9 hours. He did not sit down once. The 2 guards at the end of the corridor stopped looking at him after the 3rd hour because they could not stand to see a king who looked that afraid. When the baby cried, he closed his eyes for a long moment. When the midwife opened the door, he stepped in slowly. The baby was a boy. He had a small tuft of dark hair. He had gray eyes that would probably stay gray. He had 10 fingers and 10 toes. He had a heartbeat that was already a little too steady for a human child. The king looked at him for a long time. He did not touch him. He looked at Myra. He said, "May I?" She nodded. He picked up the baby. He held him the way only a man who has waited centuries for a child can hold a child. He did not cry. Vampires do not cry. But something in his face cracked open the same way the air in the throne hall had cracked open the first night she knelt there. He said, "Hello." He said, "I have waited a long time for you." He said, "Your mother is the bravest person I have ever met." He said it to the baby. He said it loud enough for her to hear. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed very carefully so the mattress would not jostle her, and he stayed there until she fell asleep with one hand on his wrist and the other on the small, warm shape of their son. A year passed. Then another. The Crimson Court did not crumble the way the human kingdoms expected. It steadied. A queen who had once tied ribbons on bouquets sat at the right hand of the throne now. She did not wear a heavy crown. She wore a thin silver circlet she could forget she had on. She did not give long speeches. She listened. She remembered the names of every servant in the keep. She kept the old kitchen knife in a drawer by the bed, dull and clean, never used again, never thrown away. She did not need it anymore. She kept it because the girl who had owned it had earned the right to keep it. Hadrian's name was not spoken in the keep. His family's lands were absorbed quietly into the Crimson Court without a war. No banner ever flew for him again. His cousins sent a quiet letter of thanks for a kingdom he never had to fight for. The king wrote back one line. He wrote, "Do not harm any woman in your house, or I will come." Word of that single line traveled through the human kingdoms, the way fire travels through dry grass. 3 lords on the southern border quietly divorced wives they had been beating for years. One baron freed every servant he had whipped. Another sold off his hunting dogs because he had once let them chase a maid through a field for sport. None of them ever said the king's name out loud. They did not need to. They had all heard about the night the cold king knelt for a bruised bride. They had all heard what happened to the man who put her on that floor. And the queen who never raised her voice had become, without ever lifting a sword, the safest thing a woman in those lands could pray to. Her mother lived another 4 years in the keep. She got to hold her grandson every day. She got to teach him the names of the flowers in the garden. She got to die in a warm bed in a quiet room with her daughter holding one hand and a vampire king holding the other. She died smiling. Myra buried her under a young apple tree the king had planted himself in the south corner of the grounds. The tree still bloomed every spring. The boy sat under it sometimes and talked to her like she could hear him. Myra hoped she could. On the night their son turned 3, Myra stood on the balcony above the courtyard. The same courtyard where one set of footsteps had stopped years ago and the other had kept walking. The snow was falling soft. The candles were lit. The king came up behind her and put his coat around her shoulders the way he had the first night. He said, "Are you cold?" She said no. She said, "I was just remembering." He said, "Remembering what?" She said, "The girl on the floor." He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "She is still here." She said no. She said, "She is upstairs sleeping." He smiled. He understood. He said, "Then let her sleep." He said, "She has earned it." They stood there a long time. The snow kept falling. The court below kept moving softly through the night. And the bruised, pregnant bride who once knelt at a vampire king's throne, broken and bleeding, with nothing left to lose, stood 3 years later beside the man who had knelt for her instead. She kept one hand on his arm. She kept the other on the small bump under her dress, where the second child had just begun to grow. She did not say anything about it yet. She would tell him in the morning. Tonight she just wanted to watch the snow. And the vampire king, who had not smiled in 900 years, smiled for the second time, very small, very private, where only she could see. The night closed gently around the court. The candles burned low. The keep slept. And no one in the Crimson Court ever forgot the night their cold king knelt on the marble for a flower girl in a torn white dress.